If there was one thing I wish I knew, it's that there are different ways to look at what some may refer to as an existential crisis. There's a moment that many of us know or will know when visions arrived uninvited, when the boundary between self and the rest of our reality seemingly dissolves. The 16th century mystic St. John of the Cross called this the dark night of the soul. While it's not depression, it can seem and appear that way, a dimming of everything the ego once used to feel secure and attached and grounded to reality, and everything seems to be in flux so that something truer can arise to the surface. Some of us move through the dark night slowly in a long and silent withering. Others meet it as a sudden storm with visions, voices, the dissolution of the self all at once. And this can happen to anyone, but especially to psychics or people who are highly sensitive. And this challenge has a modern name: spiritual emergency. There are other names for it, but this video is for anyone who has lived through it, is living through it now, or maybe holding space for someone who is going through it. We're going to talk about the dark night or dark nights of the soul and spiritual emergency or emergencies, what they are, and how one of the most famous psychiatrists in our history, Carl Jung, moved through his own, and why what the field of psychiatry referred to as a psychosis may have meaningful functionality outside of a medical condition. Carl Gustav Jung, he was the psychiatrist who gave us the archetypes, the collective unconscious, synchronicity, the shadow, and more. What many people don't know is that before Jung was confident enough to publish the work that he is most well known for, he was just Jung, the witness to his own unraveling, and someone who quit his teaching post in order to retreat into the safety of his own mind. In December of 1913, Jung began a series of deliberate inner experiments. He later called it active imagination. And this involved a dialoguing between his conscious and unconscious. He has noted that he would sit, sometimes gripping the table with his hands to keep himself grounded. As he opened the door to the unconscious, to the shadow, he allowed the visions to come, whether they're figures, voices, guides, symbolic landscapes, and these could be intense and extraordinary. Jung conveyed in private that he was, in his own words, quote, menaced with a psychosis. He experienced great fear during the stages of self-experiment sessions, or I guess it would be very accurate to call them channeling sessions, where he had to grip the table to hold himself together, and then he would use yoga and breath work to regulate and calm himself down before continuing. And yet, he continued very methodically, recording everything and later interpreting every image, every message and vision that he received. The result was what he eventually shared as the Red Book, his personal grimoire, his living record of the descent and his return. It was not just a breakdown, but a breakthrough. While Jung understood this distinction, it wasn't as if he wasn't worried about his sanity at the time. He knew that he needed to process the darkness, or as we say, doing the shadow work, or else these images would destroy him from within. He wrote, quote, "Had I left those images hidden in the emotions, I might have been torn to pieces by them, fallen into a neurosis, and been so ultimately destroyed by them." Unquote. So Jung decided to meet them. He then descended into the depths of his mind in order to ascend consciously and incorporate it into his psyche. What is a spiritual emergency? The term was developed by psychiatrist Stan Grof and his partner Christina Grof. Grof spent decades studying non-ordinary states of consciousness, and these include psychedelic therapy, shamanic trances, deep breath work, as well as spontaneous mystical experiences. What he found was that within the vast territory of altered inner experiences or non-ordinary states of consciousness, what looks like psychosis from the outside might have a functional component internally. Grof called these states holotropic, from the Greek word holos, meaning whole, and trepein, meaning moving toward. So holotropic states are states that orient the person towards healing and wholeness. Grof distinguished these from ordinary psychiatric crises, and in these holotropic states, the content, however frightening, tends to have meaning. It has a direction. It's often connected to deep wounds, to ancestral patterns, to collective or archetypal dimension experience that are larger than the individual self. A spiritual emergency, then, is when this kind of inner content breaks through suddenly and intensely, and it could overwhelm the person's ability to function temporarily. Grof explains that the word emergency is both a crisis as well as an emergence, emerging into this transformative growth and new levels of self-awareness and integration. It may look like visions, hearing voices, profound feelings of dissolving or ego death, or sensing presences, or even experiencing past lives, to feeling an overwhelming connection to all things, or conversely, an unbearable sense of cosmic aloneness. To a psychiatrist unfamiliar with this framework, it can appear to be a psychotic episode at first, and it is often tragically treated as one. Editor Liz here. I wanted to pause and get a little specific because the Grofs were very precise about what qualifies as a spiritual emergency. So I've linked their full article in the description, but here's their definition and criteria. So go ahead and pause this if you need to look at the information on the card. So according to Stan and Christina Grof, spiritual emergencies are episodes of unusual experience that involve changes in consciousness, which includes perceptual, emotional, cognitive, and physical. And this would entail transpersonal content, which I will define a little bit. And it temporarily disrupts normal functioning, but it carries the potential for profound healing, growth, and transformation when properly supported. So the transpersonal content may include death and rebirth experiences, past life memories, archetypal or mythological visions, out-of-body experiences, kundalini awakening, synchronicities and extrasensory perception, and states of mystical union. And this also includes psychic awakenings or initiatory experiences. They also have criteria for identification. These transpersonal content need to be present, and there has to be no underlying neurological or physical causes that cause these sensory experiences, as well as the person being in relatively good health. They need to recognize this experience as an inner process. And the other one being that the individual has no long history of conventional psychiatric treatment. So medical causes need to be ruled out first. And one thing that's emphasized throughout is that spiritual emergency frameworks are not a substitute for medical care, and they're complementary in nature. One note on the psychiatric history: many people have a psychiatric history precisely because the spiritual emergency was never considered as a framework or evaluation. By default, individuals are routed to the psychiatric route. So I wouldn't say this disqualifies the person from this framework, and it's a reflection of a gap in support at the time. While it's important to introduce an alternative understanding to temporary psychotic states, please note that this is not an argument against psychiatry. It is not a call to avoid medical support, because safety matters. If someone is in a state where they can endanger themselves and others, they need care. However, what if some of what we call psychosis is actually an initiatory crisis? In shamanic traditions across the world, there is a well-documented phenomenon known as the shamanic illness, where there's a period of intense inner crisis, sometimes with visions, voices, and disorientation that initiates a person into a new level of spiritual perception and service. The ones who survive this descent become known as the town healer or the town shaman. And this is a cross-cultural observation that has been documented. Jung's process was his own version of this. He was experienced various psychic experiences that are documented by Shamdasani in the introduction of the Red Book, including these precognitive or premonition dreams that Jung had, which showed him a sea of blood and dead bodies, and he had this dream 3 times before the start of World War I. Grof's framework gives us language for this experience that we've had before modern psychology. When the psyche is moving towards integration, the content that erupts can feel destabilizing, but it is purposeful, because with the right support, the right container, and the right understanding, what looks like a crisis can result in an expansion towards integration. A personal note: when I was 18, I also went through an initiatory crisis that at the time I was worried that something was wrong with me. And now when I look back, I do feel that it also had something to do with our general culture's age of consent, as when I reached that age of 18, it's like, hey, by the way, are you still interested in walking this spiritual path? Just making sure. Some traditions may call it the opening of inner sight. Some Daoists might view these states as the demonic trials, or mo-kao, the trials and tests that challenges your inner will, and there are turbulent inner imbalances on top of potential external influence, such as by negative entities, that if met without understanding, it can look like psychosis from the outside. So at the time, I was routed through the psychiatric care route. And while I don't dismiss what was offered and what I learned and explored, reading many books about the diagnosis and symptoms of what the DSM described at the time, what turned the tide for me was when a family friend, a Daoist practitioner and psychic, she advised my parents to bring me to a Daoist teacher and perhaps understand some of the symptoms and reframe them as related to a psychic awakening. And that was the route we explored, fortunately. And the Daoist teacher we consulted first helped me disconnect from any interference externally, and then helped me guide for stabilization or ting. So this is grounding the body, the breath, and stabilizing the mind, body, and spirit connection. And I share this not lightly and not as a universal prescription. Like, it's not a one-size-fits-all what it might look like. But from my personal experience or case study, these frameworks exist outside of psychiatry, and going through psychiatry is not the only healing modality and approach, and not all of these chapters that I now reframe as spiritual emergencies require medical intervention. In Daoist inner alchemy, the practice known as neidan, there are stages of cultivation that require extraordinary care, and practitioners speak of the fire phases, which entails the internal regulation of breath, spirit, and inner intention, or your heart and soul. And when mismanaged, it can lead to what's known as these demonic states, demonic conditions, demonic or inner demons, or battle of the inner demons. And these are states of perceptual distortion, or emotional upheaval, or maybe detachment from ordinary reality. Long before the field of psychology, Daoist practitioners had mapped out some of these similar symptoms one can encounter, resulting in the loss of, or temporary loss of, mental clarity, emotional imbalance, and feeling possessed by forces beyond their understanding. And Daoists had built systems to navigate around it by establishing moral and ethical grounding and stabilization, breath work, meditation, through teacher-student relationship, and having community containers. Jung encountered some resonance where he described these non-baseline behavior and described colloquially when someone is ridden by the devil or acting as if they're possessed. And he recognized it not as mere illness, but as the eruption of unconscious content emerging, or the shadow self peeking through, demanding integration. Active imagination, which is what Jung later called and developed into an analytical method for engaging in the unconscious, for having a structured dialogue with your shadow, allowing it to emerge. While analytical psychology and Taoism have different frameworks, both describe this period of intense inner turbulence, disturbance of perception and emotion, and the necessity to meet this content rather than simply suppressing it and ignoring it, and seeing that potential with the right support for profound transformation. Jung wrote to his collaborator Richard Wilhelm, who also translated the I Ching and The Secret of the Golden Flower, and Wilhelm has sent Jung a copy of his manuscript for Jung to write a commentary. And this was published in 1929 in the translation of the Taoist text called The Secret of the Golden Flower. And Jung felt that fate seemed to have given them the role of the two bridge pillars carrying the bridge between East and West. Indeed, psychology has helped us build a bridge, not just between East and West, but between science and spirituality. And this bridge is still walked by researchers, clinicians, shamanic practitioners, transpersonal psychologists, and educators, also by theologians and physicists, etc. And also by many of you who are watching this right now, perhaps in the middle of your own journey and experience. If you are in your own initiatory crisis right now, know that a world-renowned psychiatrist have sat where you sat, gripping the table, afraid of losing their minds and doubting their own sanity. But they were not lost. They were becoming. Resources mentioned in this video are linked below. If you or someone you love is in acute distress, please do reach out to a mental health professional. Transpersonal frameworks and psychiatric care are not opposites, but it's good to be aware of the different resources and frameworks and having language options to communicate your experience. You can choose from calling it the dark night of the soul, demonic trials, spiritual emergency or spiritual crisis, or doing shadow work. Before we close, I want to leave you with something practical because frameworks, while might be helpful, but sometimes you just need to know what to do at 2 a.m. in the morning. Definitely do reach out to your support network as needed, your friends and family. But if you are in the middle of it and it's the middle of the night, here are 5 things that work based on my personal experience having gone through dark nights of the soul. So number 1, stabilize the body. The nervous system is the bridge between the spiritual and the physical. So consider cold water on the face or wrists and having bare feet on the ground and focus on the breath. Take those deep cleansing breaths and anything that sends a signal of safety to your body. That is important because you cannot integrate any shadow work or additional information that your body cannot contain. So maybe consider taking a nice warm bath with salt inside. That always helps ground. Number 2, nourish and hydrate deliberately. So any intense psychic or energetic experiences, it uses a lot of your bodily resources. Consider warm, simple, and dense foods, root vegetables, spinach with iron, and broths and grains, and helps pull awareness back down into the body and make sure you chew mindfully. Electrolytes matter too because the body is doing real metabolic work. Even though you might feel that the whole crisis is only happening mentally and inside and not related to your body and inside your soul and your mind, but it's actually the same system. Number 3, protect your sleep environment. Sleep is when a lot of integration and processing actually happens. So try to keep your room dark, quiet, and energetically clean. Use your salt lamps, your essential oil water sprays, your saging and smudging, and open the windows during the day to let the air flow through for an air cleanse. If sleep is difficult, even horizontal rest, lying down with your eyes closed is very valuable. And don't fight the dreams and let it process. So it's important to feel really safe in your sleep environment. Number 4, move and release through the body. So psychic and emotional intensity gets stored somatically. So consider using a foam roller or getting a foot massage or reflexology. It can be surprisingly effective. The feet in particular is deeply connected to grounding the meridians in TCN and reflexology. So consider doing that because it's like getting a actual reset, pushing the reset button. So get a foot massage. Consider doing gentle movements or even a shaking, like shake it out. Or again, with the warm bath with the salt can discharge what the nervous system is holding. And number 5, limit input and increase stillness. So reduce screen time, reduce noise and crowded areas, because while you're in that state, other people's energies and emotions and interferences, it's not going to help. And it could amplify what you're going through internally. So create a temporary cocoon to reduce the stimulation and try to spend time in nature instead. Maybe work from home if possible, or take your sick days and give the inner process space to move at its own pace rather than being overridden by too many external demands. So I hope this helps a little bit. Let me know if it does or not. If this video resonated with you, or if you're in a chapter right now that feels like a crossing and you're looking for clarity on what your soul is actually moving through, I do offer Akashic Records reading and remote energy healing to support you. The Akashic Records are essentially your soul's living archive, and having a reading could help you understand why this particular passage is happening for you, and what patterns are asking to be seen, and what your path forward looks like from a soul level. If that calls to you, the link to book a session is in the description below. I'd be honored to sit with you and help you through it. A recent client has emailed me about seeing daily synchronicities, and sometimes you just need a cosmic librarian to point you in the right direction. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video.